We are here today with Dr. Ann to have kind of an all-encompassing conversation about Impact KCK, the program here at Avenue of Life, and then just kind of what makes our approach a little bit different from maybe others that she has seen. So, Dr. Ann, thanks so much for being here and hanging out with us today.
Thank you for having me, John.
So can we start out and have you talk a little bit about kind of what your role is at Avenue?
Thank you. Well, I have the privilege of being the program evaluator for Impact KCK. My role started kind of sort of towards the end of the first year. I had heard great things, went to a call to action that the school district was doing. It was a renewed call to action. The program was already underway. And the more I learned about what was going on and how effective Impact KCK is and was at serving families who were experiencing homelessness or profound housing instability, the more I wanted to find out how and why it worked and do some sort of assessment or evaluation. And so that's how I began working with Avenue of Life. I was privileged. I was the Schutte Professor of Urban Affairs at University of Missouri, Kansas City. And I had some money to go out and do community work, and that's why I took the job there.
Yeah.
But also the Kemper Foundation folks funded me to do an assessment. They asked me to tell them what the secret sauce was. And it was a joy. It took about 18 months or so, and the first assessment was published in October of 2018.
So as you started to dig in, you mentioned, I think you said Kemper was asking, hey, what's the secret sauce? What makes this program work? As you started to dig into that, what kind of came to the surface?
It's interesting that you asked that, John, because as we've had folks contact us from all over the country asking Desiree, asking me, asking others, how could we do this in our community? We began training others. And so I've led the training efforts. And we found that we needed a very shorthand way to tell folks why this program works. There's much more to it in terms of delving down, but we like to call this the 4 pillars of success. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing is the skillful application of the collective impact model for community change. So the collective impact model hasn't been around that long. It was first published and envisioned by very high-powered philanthropic consultants, John Kania, and I think the gentleman's other name is Mark Kramer. Maybe they're both Johns. I'm sorry. Anyhow, Kania and Kramer. Yeah. In a publication that is free related to social innovation that Stanford University publishes. So this is developed as a specific means for addressing complex social problems. So, we have to work together. We have to work together across all sectors in order to address complex problems in our society, like, for instance, student homelessness being just one example. And we've tried for decades to do effective community action, and there have been some successes, certainly, but some things that failed to fulfill their promise. And so I take it that philanthropic organizations ask Caney and Kramer to write about what they have observed that was most effective. And so that's how they came up with the collective impact model for community change. It involves a common agenda. It involves shared measurement. It involves mutually reinforcing activities on the part of partners. It involves continuous communication across those partners, and then a backbone organization. So all of us have probably heard something about lead agencies when we have collaboration out in the community. And what collective impact does for us is envisions the backbone organization, where basically the backbone organization has its own staff and it facilitates the success of everyone together. Everyone, every community organization, every person working together. If that is skillfully done, that is part of why a program like Impact KCK works so well. The second thing about Impact KCK is single point of service. So if you can imagine, one of the things I like to say when I talk about this, any of us in our everyday life, if we have 3 errands to run in addition to taking care of our children and getting them to school and working and so on, it can be tough to get through that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, even for those of us who have perfectly good vehicles and things like that. So the single point of service takes the strain and the near impossibility of getting to various service providers at different locations and puts them all conveniently there for the family. So in Impact KCK, that's an Impact Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And so how many partners? There's 80 plus partners now, I think,
There's
possibly
a lot.
90.
Yeah, it keeps growing, yeah.
And so the partners who are there for each day on an Impact Wednesday, they know who they're going to see because the navigators have told them that, and I'll talk about navigation in a moment. And they know that they're not going to see anybody that's not qualified for their particular resources or that doesn't need their resources.
Right.
But so it helps the partner organization make the most effective use of their time and resources. But more powerfully for the family, they don't have to go all around town hoping that someone can help them, telling their story over and over, further increasing their trauma from their situation, including their children's trauma. And frankly, the more I have worked with these programs, the more I understand that the likelihood that anyone would even make the rounds of all the different places they might be referred to that might have assistance for them, they're never going to make the entire rounds of it.
I can't imagine how hard that would be. Like, one, like you've mentioned, just physically getting to all of those places, you're telling your story over and over again. You're basically having to advocate for yourself every time you go, to then hope that you meet their list of qualifications, because everyone has different qualifications for sometimes funding reasons, sometimes others, and that's okay. That's part of it. But that's a really difficult thing to navigate as an individual, especially then if you start hearing no.
Yes.
Build that up a few different times, that motivation to do those errands or seek that assistance. That gets really difficult just emotionally, spiritually. Like that's a pretty big task.
Well, I'm going to talk about navigation in a moment, but linking that with single point of service, what you've just said reminds me of what we now call the power of yes. Mm-hmm. The power of yes is part of how and why Impact KCK works. The navigator will have gone through an initial screening and initial plan with the family before they come to an Impact Wednesday. And when they get a clipboard when they come in, and the clipboard is customized for them. It has information about each of the partner tables that they will go to in order to get their needs met and further their journey towards housing stability. Well, we have found that it's not just the convenience, it's that you're talking about a group of people who may have heard no more times in their lives than they've ever heard yes.
Yeah.
And so that in and of itself is transformational with people. Tough to, you can't quantify that, but we know it's real. Yeah,
I feel like that's something you feel that, right?
You do.
Because, even in our own lives, hearing no, it's not fun,
no.
Right? Like, especially as adults, right? Kids hear it probably a little more often from parents and things, but as adults, like, it doesn't happen very much.
Particularly when you're desperate to take care of your family.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can relate. I had my daughter, my husband, and I when we were undergraduates. And I can remember laying awake at night worrying about how we were going to afford diapers till the end of the month. But that was in the early 80s when those things were still a lot easier to do than things are today. And so that's my point of connection, I hope, with having at least a little bit of understanding about where people are coming from.
Yeah.
The navigation is just... I'm going to use a non-technical term here. It's an amazing process.
Yeah.
It's an amazing process. And again, this works because it works on several levels. So that fourth pillar we call intensive case management. So what they do is once a family is referred, the school district refers to Avenue of Life, and then the Impact KCK director will assign that to a navigator. The navigator will make contact with the family, have them in to have an intake interview, and at that time they'll use a modified version of the Arizona Self-Sufficiency Matrix, which uses 16 domains of functioning. So it could be everything from housing to income, employment, childcare, healthcare, mental health, legal. I could list them all off, but
Yeah.
I think you get the picture.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
There's a lot of them because all of these things, transportation, all of these things are necessary to the functioning of the family so that they can become and remain stably housed, so their children can be at school and ready to learn. Having a full belly and having good medical care and having that stability of a permanent home. So then the navigator works with the family, gets them set up with their first empowerment, in this case, Impact KCK day, and then has them come back as needed, but also works with them by phone and so on. Coaches them, becomes a mentor for them, really a resource I'm not talking money here. I'm talking these folks may not have anyone to talk with, to be supportive of them, who isn't, for instance, in their own difficult situation themselves, and some may not have a network of folks who are kind or supportive, period. So the navigator is that trusted person who will then make certain that all of the resources that are required to help this family get to and maintain permanent housing status are coordinated and done in the best way possible. The family tells their story once to that navigator. They don't have to tell every partner. There might be times when there might be things that are relevant to discuss with a partner, but the navigator makes sure it all happens for the family, going so far as even when the family is ready for its permanent housing solution, which often happens within the first 4 to 6 weeks. It's been interesting. People will say, well, how long does all this take? And there are 4 required courses. We have heard from program participants, particularly this last year when I've sat down and done interviews with program participants, that the Finance 101 class becomes like a support group because, and so people are mutually reinforcing, yeah, I've been there. Here's how I coped with it. Or, yeah, you made a mistake this week, but, you're going to get over that. You're going to move on. Housing 101 deals with not just landlord-tenant law and responsibilities, but how to be a good neighbor. Don't play really loud music after 11 o'clock at night,
Right.
maybe. How to be a good tenant. Don't call your landlord at 9 p.m.
Right.
And particularly don't call your landlord at 9 p.m. and ask them to come change a light bulb.
Yeah.
There are things that many of us may take for granted that we know how to do, grew up knowing how to do because we saw our parents do it.
Right.
There are people who either learned that and forgot it because of the stress and trauma of whatever they've been going through and for however many years, or they never learned it. And so we found fairly early on in the program that we had folks who had, for instance, been raised in weekly motels that maybe were less desirable, kind of things in Kansas City, Kansas, in terms of dirt and environment and whatnot, that when they got their first housing solution, they didn't know about cleaning house. They literally didn't know about housekeeping.
Someone had always done it.
Yeah, exactly. So how that connects with navigation and intensive case management? Well, when the navigators figured that out, they figured out they needed to teach some folks what products to use and what you do to maintain a home. So that's one of the ways in which intense case management is customized to the family and is done in a way that respects the family's dignity but provides them with that platform they need to be successful. So then when a permanent housing solution has been identified, the navigator will go out and take a look at it, make certain that it is what Desiree Moniz likes to call a dignified unit,
Right.
a unit that they can afford. For me, because I've done so much federal housing policy, we're talking about what is commonly called housing quality standards. And so goes out there and makes sure, because we don't want folks pouring their money down the drain in a non-standard unit or something that's not going to be healthy for them and their children. And then the navigator will make sure that the family receives that first month's rent and the security deposit as a way to get established. The navigator also sets the family up with Flourish. This used to be done by Avenue of Life itself, but I think it now is done by Flourish, where donated furniture is brought to the home. There's a complete turnkey operation. There's no searching for mattresses or having your kids sleep on the floor. There is a table and chairs for folks to sit and have a meal, and pots and pans, eating utensils, and so on. If anybody listening can remember what it was like to set up their first home and how much it costs.
It's a lot,
just to get, even if you're doing used, how much to set up that home with your kitchen and pots and pans and all of that. It's non-trivial. And so this means it's another way in which this program that Impact KCK ensures that people have the appropriate supports to not just become permanently and stably housed, but to remain that way.
Yeah.
And then the final pillar, which I've kind of gotten ahead of myself on, is the permanent housing solution.
Yeah.
So we like to say, although I wish it weren't true maybe, that you can do all of the first three pillars, but if you don't connect people with the fourth one, the permanent housing solution, they're going to be homeless again. They're going to be homeless again. And so that permanent housing solution in this market in particular, I mean, things are never easy for lower income people, but, the rents have gone crazy.
Very crazy.
It's just, I mean, and, this area used to be, a very affordable Midwestern area, and not so much now.
Yeah.
And it's lovely that people want to come here and live here, like people like me, who know it's a wonderful place to live and have your family and everything. But boy, it puts a lot of pressure on those rents. And so what they've done over the years at Impact KCK is develop working relationships with landlords. And so these are landlords who understand the program. They embrace its values. They know that, for instance, if a tenant damages, whether accidentally or on purpose, puts a hole in the wall, Avenue of Life will make it right. There might have been one or two times when a refrigerator has walked away.
Sure.
When a family has left, Avenue of Life comes in and makes it right. They replace it. That indemnification of the landlord creates a much greater willingness to lease to those who are part of the Impact KCK program. And it's strength upon strength. The longer it keeps going on, the stronger it is, that relationship between Avenue of Life and landlords.
So you mentioned that you did some interviews this year as you were going through your assessment. Was there anything in those interviews that kind of stuck out to you or maybe surprised you a little bit?
It's interesting. The biggest issue for folks has been the difficulty in finding a unit they can afford. So federal guidelines for housing affordability are that a household should pay no more than 30% of their gross income for rent and utilities, not including things like cable and telephone, but things like water, gas, electric. When you have a lower income, that number might be very unlikely to get you a unit in this market. And so finding something that even comes close to what they can technically afford is very difficult.
Even to 30%, that's a large percentage of your income.
It is. I often think that it's, and it's 30% of gross income.
Yeah.
So I've always thought that when we're talking about serving folks who are at or below 30% of area median income, and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, calculates that figure for geographic regions every year, and the federal government calls that extremely low income. So for a family of four, HUD says that the area median income this year is something like $104,000 a year. So 30% of that is about a little over $30,000 a year. We have plenty of families who do not make $30,000 a year. We hope that by program participation and coaching by marvelous partners at places like Alliance Workforce and so on, that people will get to that more living wage. But, 30% just across the board is too much for a lot of people to be spending.
It's a lot.
Because you have to use whatever's left for taxes, for food, for transportation and car repairs, health care. There's just a whole lot there. So, that was the biggest, most resounding challenge that folks reported to me.
I've been surprised how different every situation is with different families, right? So things that I wouldn't think about as being a big hurdle, like, for example, having a photo ID.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so
big one.
I know this is a
I
big
know
one,
it now, but I didn't always.
Right, I never would have thought about that, because the idea of going to get a driver's license or an ID, grab my utility bills, go and do the thing, and on and on and on. It's just never been. It's not something I've ever had to struggle with.
Yes.
But put yourself in the shoes of someone that is experiencing homelessness at that moment. You don't have an address.
Yes.
Okay, so if you show up and try and go get a driver's license and say, I don't have an address, well, prove that you live here. How is that supposed to happen, right? So, but then start to think about, if you don't have an ID, all of the things that prevents you from being able to do at that point. It's crazy how I don't want to say one little thing, but one thing like that will hold up so many other things that someone needs to get through in their life.
That is a big one. And like you, I didn't always know that either. I have been doing housing policy for over 35 years now, but my original focus was not on homelessness. And so there were things I just didn't know about. And that ID thing, it's just a huge hurdle. And of course, what are you going to do if you have a car that is broken down? What are you going to do? You need to get to work.
Yeah.
Public transportation. Yeah, okay. But
it's not amazing in Kansas City.
No, we don't have the world's best public transportation in the Kansas City region.
Yeah.
We actually do better than some jurisdictions, but still, the amount of time it might take to get to work, how you're going to get your kids to childcare before you get on that journey to work, and how you're going to pick them up on time. There are all these things that none of us have thought of.
I think a lot of people would be, so if you had not spent time, in social work or working with people experiencing homelessness, I think a lot of people would be surprised how many of them come to us experiencing homelessness already employed.
Oh,
right. So there's
I'm glad you said that, John.
Way of thinking of like, oh, just go get a job, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that kind of thing. And for example, I got to do an interview with a lady that was in our program, and she was telling me her story, what she was experiencing, and her experience there at Avenue. She works in the medical field. Yeah. Right. So that's like you would think.
One of my interviewees did too. I mean, we may have spoken to the same person. It
could have been the same person. Yeah. But like you say to someone else, you say to like someone in high school, yeah, go to the medical field, right? Like good pay, good benefits. It's a great place to go get a job. But in her situation, it was just a series of things happening in a row that led to the situation that she was in, and we were able to help her, and it's awesome, and I think she's in a good place now. But there's a lot of misconceptions people have about homelessness and how someone can end up there.
Very big misconceptions, and I see that certainly with the information that we have on Impact KCK participants. I'm also seeing quite a bit of that with the KCPS Empowerment Program on the Missouri side, where they are replicating Impact KCK thanks to a generous Hall Family Foundation grant. And Avenue of Life is the backbone. And the average income of the folks I've analyzed on the Missouri side of the state line is about $1,600 a month. Most of the time, that's work income. It's very few of our folks are coming to us where their only source of income is, for instance, disability income. But of course, we know it's difficult to get disability approved. So if that's what their source of income is, then that's probably genuine. But we do have folks, because of size of family and whatnot, that are in the $3,000 and even $3,500 to $4,000 level of income. So most folks would say, oh, well, then those
should
folks
be able to sort that out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's just not true, because you can be one car repair away from not being able to pay your rent. among other things, or one medical bill. I mean, not everyone has good health insurance. And then I have found in working with these groups that then there's an income level beyond which you don't qualify for Medicaid, but you're working, but you don't have health insurance. So then you have that terrible catch-22.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just so many things that can. Or your kids are growing fast and they need new shoes. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
it's just all kinds of
Every
things.
like 3 months.
Right? Yeah.
It goes quick.
I mean, it's been a long time since I was in that situation, but I can't even imagine what. And if some families have 5 children,
Mm-hmm.
the average size of the families tends to run around 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
It is most often in Impact KCK and KCPS empowerment a single mother with 3 or 4 children. But that's just a lot. It's a lot when you're talking about a lot of mouths to feed, a lot of feet to have shoes on.
Childcare expenses for that. Oh my gosh.
When I look at what childcare expenses are, it looks like having one child in childcare is about the amount of my mortgage payment.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not certain how people are supposed to be able to do that and still have money for anything else. Mm-hmm. And you have to have some level of clothing to go to work.
Right.
There's just, there's a lot. The other thing that I will mention that I neglected to mention earlier is that part of the power of Impact KCK is that the program remains available through the high school graduation of the youngest child. Now, that youngest child may not even be born yet,
right?
Or they might be a baby in arms, or they might be 4. But once referred and once a participant in Impact KCK, that family can come back for assistance at any time with no further referral. So among other things that I've learned from talking with navigators over the years is that sometimes that's going to be somebody just had a bad car repair, somebody just lost a job and they need some bridging help to get to the next job. But the navigators become such trusted people in the lives of these folks that sometimes they're just going to call and brainstorm about solutions. Mm-hmm. And to me, that says almost more than anything else about the effectiveness of that intensive case management model.
Well, Dr. Ann, thank you for the role that you played at Avenue, the work that you do there, and thank you for spending time with us here today.
Thank you.
We look forward to future conversations.
All right. Thank you so much, John.
Thanks so much for watching. If you would like to learn more about our program, either Impact KCK or just more about Avenue of Life, you can visit our website at avenueoflife.org. There you can also donate financially. You can donate in-kind donations, and then also find information about volunteering with Avenue. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. See you guys soon.